Good morning again. JV here. A little bit, we'll do a little snow cone diaries entry this morning. We're going to talk a little bit about meditation and chakras. I like it when those things are in the background. So you can tell I have a little bit of an OCD and alignment. I like things to be balanced. That should be clear at this point, right? So anyway, good morning, everyone. I just finished a brief meditation practice this morning. I was given a both mantra and visualization from my teacher, and tying into a lot of the work and the discussions that we've been having around metaphysics. What you start to come to understand is that, basically we are these sort of energy reactors, more or less, that are embodied, right? But as such, there's some specific, there's a way that the engine works, is the best way to describe it. And the engine is energy, and the energy is centered around the chakras and the sushumna and the two kind of snakes, that male and female, that circle around the spine and up and down through the chakras. And the chakras basically at some level determine the dimensional focus that we have in terms of energy reactors, and that focus, that dimensional level, has a mapping, if you will, to a certain chakra center or group of centers, sets of 3 typically. And so when we meditate, I actually just saw this great video that talks specifically about the engine that effectively you're tuning during meditation, because that's what you're doing. You're basically, getting in touch with the energy, understanding that it's there, visualizing it to a certain extent, right? And if you're not, you should be. Typically in the heart center is where they want you to visualize it, because this is where the bulk of your energy reactor is. And if you're really looking to harmonize, yourself with your surroundings, this is a good place to start. We talk a little bit about this, Homo mysticus, the 7 spheres, the 7 different sort of relations that you have, human relations that you have, your connection to society, your connection to your romantic partner, your connection to your family, your children, your parents, and professionally, what you're doing to contribute back to society and so on. So all of those things are sort of the external spheres. And there's internal spheres as well with respect to the chakras, which has association with the number 7, which I get into in pretty good detail in Homo Mysticus, and the 7 planets. And, you get this, the days of the week, you get sort of this really true understanding that, the number 7, and as it relates to energy centers, as above, so below, is a very integral part of our existence. Understanding these things, this is part of sacred geometry and numerology. Sacred numerology is that you start to understand these numbers and these relationships and how they're sort of embedded into the fabric of the universe. You begin to understand yourself as a component of, an integral, a part of, an element of, an instantiation of this sort of cosmic, organic principle of life, right? Right, so anyway, we're going to try something different today. Well, first, I did want to mention something. If you're here and you're listening, we'll talk a lot about the illusory nature of physical reality. We'll talk a lot about that. And that's not to say that it's not real. It's to say that it's not necessarily what it appears to be. But what I'll always stay rooted in, and one of the things that I think is important about the message from here, is to stay rooted in the physical world. We have a responsibility to not only take care of ourselves, but to contribute back to, at some level, to the society at large, which for us is very complicated today, extremely complex, versus what it was, in antiquity or when we were hunter-gatherer societies and stuff like that. But this sort of integral relationship between the individual and, not only, and the different areas of the collectives, these 7 spheres, which is a post that I submitted on Sunday on my blog, snowconenewyorkcity.com. If you're not following that, you should be. You got to stay rooted in this world. And this is, note to self and also to everybody. This is not an excuse to tell everybody to go pound sand and do whatever the fuck you want. It's not what this is. It's also not a recommendation to, throw away your job and your, family related, responsibilities to your parents, whatever, and go climb a mountain in the Himalayas. That's not what I'm suggesting at all. In fact. What I'm suggesting is you can still be a, infinite being of light, of energy, and you can still operate and behave in the world in a very sort of practical, pragmatic way, and do your part to facilitate harmony in your aspect of life. And if everybody starts doing that, we have this sort of massive revolution that takes place. That's first of all completely organic, and it's rooted in the fundamental understanding that thou art that. Tat Tvam Si, thou art that. It's a Vedic, Upanishadic philosophical term. It comes from the Upanishads. Thou art that. The distinction itself is illusory. Okay. So I'm arguing pretty strongly to stay rooted, get your shit together. You know what I'm saying? Jordan Peterson does a nice job laying this out for guys in particular, because guys need to be spoken to very clearly. Guys need a very specific set of instructions. Women can sort of navigate around that. Guys are like, no, I need you to do this. And then it needs to be spelled out for them. This idea of, take care of your own business. Start there first. Don't start asking to solve the world. Everybody wants to solve the world's problems and run the United States and solve global warming, and they can't fucking get to work on time. Don't take out their garbage, get your shit together. Start there and then move from there. So having said that, most of the material that you're going to get from me, this is not, introductory material as it relates to yoga and metaphysics, right? And enlightenment, ultimately, in the true meaning of that term, right? As sort of a physical phenomenon. This is pretty pro-level stuff. So, advanced from an academic standpoint in terms of looking at the sort of root texts, and most of that's in my writing. And then I try and sort of synthesize and crystallize that for you guys in these talks, whatever these things end up being, right? But I think some people are listening, but let's just see what we have here. Who knows? But the message is going to get out one way or the other. I'm pretty convinced of that. Otherwise, I wouldn't be doing this, honestly. But it's fairly advanced. So, like, if you haven't had some introductory relationship with Patanjali and the Yoga Sutras, for example, which we'll talk through a little bit here, and some of the Upanishadic literature, Taoist stuff is a little bit optional, I guess you'd say, but I do draw from a lot of that stuff, particularly the I Ching, because of its relationship to sacred geometry and numerology, which I've been fascinated in terms of that east-west contact. But it's pretty advanced. So, and part of what I think you'll get different from me than you'll get from some of the other sources around this type of information, right, is enlightenment is harmony just as much as it is, existence, knowledge, bliss, absolute. Like that's the piece that, the piece that I think is, and for many years, I was lost in there too, searching for this ultimate experience of bliss. Just meditate all the time. And, you're, why haven't I had this experience? This guy's had that experience. This guy was just I actually talked to some folks who was fellow students of mine, also initiates. And even to this day, they talk a little bit about that. It's, this person had this spiritual experience and this person had that spiritual experience. And, and therefore, like, first of all, the whole life itself is an amazing miracle. The fact that I'm sitting here talking to you and you're listening to this right now, it's an absolute miracle. This is a spiritual experience. I mean, as much as any spiritual experience. And, the idea of bringing sort of that element into your life is part of what we're trying to do here, not chase some experience on the top of some mountain somewhere. And I think people get a little bit lost, chasing the bright new shiny object. It's like, even in spirituality, people are like, oh yeah, this guy had this guy had this. Just take care of your own shit and balance your life. And that's yoga. It's not more complicated than that. Now it is, but it's not. And you know what you need to do. You really do. But that second part stems from and it comes out of your relationship with spirit. And that's part of what you're cultivating when you're practicing yoga. And so there's a philosophical element to that. There's an actual, energetic component to that. I'm talking about Raha Yoga, Gnana Yoga is the yoga of knowledge. There's an element of devotion to that, and love, which is the two trying to become one, Bhakti Yoga, and self-service, Karma Yoga. And this, I talk about those four yogas a lot. That's coming from Swami Vivekananda, and that's sort of the kind of crystallized message that he has in terms of not only revitalizing Vedanta, which is one of the oldest philosophical systems in the world, but bringing yoga to the West. This is part of his message, the four yogas. My teacher's written a book about that. But you have to really you have to appreciate these four aspects of yoga as they relate to, again, this concept of enlightenment, which is a concept of tuning and a concept of being in harmony with, with the world, and also understanding the sort of hidden dimensions of reality, if you will, esoteric, hidden, right? So pretty advanced pro level stuff. If you're still here, great. I'm going to get into some of this stuff. I've been doing this for a long time, and I have an academic bent, which is consistent with the school and the lineage that I come from. They published a lot of books. Nikhilananda, Swami Nikhilananda was the person that founded the center that I was trained in. He translated 16 to 12 major Upanishads. He translated the Bhagavad Gita into English. He translated the Gospels of Sri Ramakrishna. And he started and founded the Ramakrishna Center in 94th Street between 5th and Madison. You should go and check it out. It's cool shit there if you're in New York. Obviously, born and raised in New York, snowconenewyorkcity.com. Yes. So anyway, I studied with those guys. Nikhilananda was in collaboration with Joseph Campbell and others in terms of not only the Sanskrit to English translation, but also the ideas that not only underpin the life of Ramakrishna, from which the whole school emerges, but also general archetypical and mythical type themes that Campbell has spent a lot of time talking about, right? Here with 1,000 Faces. But what we're going to try is and go through a couple of images, because I'm a big image guy. Picture speaks 1,000 words, right? So that's, I got stuff in the background, like those images. And this is why, from a symbol standpoint, this is when you meditate, you have a visual, you have typically an audio, hearing, mantra element, you have a visual element, and then typically you have a tactile element. And this is true when you're trying to learn anything, right? In school, they have different senses that you need to bring to bear. The same is true for meditation. you're trying to sort of tap into a concept or an idea, and you use these sort of audio, visual, and other elements of your physical form in order to elicit and bring about that state of being, right? That's what you're doing. From a physics standpoint, you have a energy reactor that you're in control of, right? Some responsibility there, I would think. And what you're doing is you're effectively tuning that to higher vibrational states of being or states of awareness, because your level of awareness, what you can perceive, is a function of basically how and at what level you're vibrating. And at what level you're vibrating has a mapping back to the chakras at some level. So let's look. Let's see if I can do this. I don't know if this is going to work, but we're going to try it. Okay, so now you should be seeing my screen. And what you see is a series of images here. Some of these are in some of my books. This is my favorite here. This is a lot. I did some work on this in Homo Mysticus, which is pretty fascinating. Okay, so this is the system. Okay, so this is what's basic. This is how the energy reactor is designed. This is the architecture. These are schematics. Don't get confused. Don't get all freaked out about, I'm spiritual, I'm going to be one with God and whatever. Stop. This is the way your body functions. And the only reason that you exist in this here and now and that you're listening to this video is because you have effectively spirit, prana, the Holy Spirit, okay, that permeates your being, that is connected to and given you life, prana, the breath of life. That's what that is. Okay. And it runs up and down your spine. And and your health depends upon the proper functioning of the system, your ability to recognize, perceive, and understand everything is baked on this. Once your prana, your breath of life leaves the body's dead. It's just an instrument. And this thing that I just described, that seems so straightforward, is the very core of the intellectual leap that you need to take to become Homo Mysticus, from Homo sapiens, a being that knows to a being that exists in multiple dimensions, or recognition of the multidimensionality of your existence. That's Homo Mysticus. I'm declaring the existence of, and the forking and the branching of, a new species of mankind that understands this idea in the core of their being, that they are quote unquote spiritual beings, in the sense that there's a breath of life, prana, spiritus, that from which that literally breathes life into this physical form. And it runs through these chakras. You got a base and a root chakra, and your heart chakra, which again, as I mentioned, is sort of the core, the strongest of the energy centers. And then the energies up here, which is sort of, these are the keys to multidimensional reality, and not only the dream state, but also the more advanced states of meditation. They sort of arise in and from and out of, not only focus on the third eye and above, 1,000-petal lotus on top, but also just as you get more in touch with those energies, the lotus flowers that represent those different chakras actually blossom. That's the idea. So when the 1,000-petal lotus blossoms, this whole other reality, basically, you perceive and sort of enter this other, perceive yourself as a true being of light. And as such, the world of ideas and dreams and archetypes becomes much more prominent in those dimensions. It is said that you can operate really from about 3 chakras at any given time. So you're either operating at pretty low levels, or most people are right around here. And then as you become sort of more advanced on the spiritual journey, you start to operate out of here. But what's really key and important, what I do want to emphasize is the system of yoga has 8 limbs, Patanjali system, and that's the system you should be looking at. If you're studying or practicing yoga at all, yes, there's the asanas, the postures, meditation, singing, all, yes. And yeah, you feel great after you do some, yoga, but what you need to understand is that when you start to manipulate some of these energy centers, particularly when you start opening some of the energy centers, the higher dimensional energy centers, you need a firm moral, ethical, and philosophical base so that you don't crash. Okay, so there's a scientific element to the practices that Patanjali lays out: ahimsa, nonviolence, acting in word and deed consistently, and being very careful with your sexual energy. All of these things are firm and core elements of base yoga that are there, not so that you go to heaven and you're a better person. No, it's because if you start to manipulate some of these energy centers and you start to open up and sort of really plug in your reactor, you don't want this energy crashing, because bad shit comes about. And I've been manipulating and playing with this stuff for a long time, and I can attest 100%, like, when you start playing with this stuff, you need to make sure that your core moral and ethical practices, and particularly you have control over your eating and your sexual appetites and stuff like that, that stuff is well under control, and you're operating out of your heart center as much as you can. Okay, those are important. And the whole serpent idea in the caduceus, right? This is a very old kind of hermetic, the idea of health. This is, you see basically the two serpents, the male and the female. I think they call them the Pingala and the Ida, that circulate up the spine, and then, from there's energy, and he pushes and pulls the energy up and down the spine, right? Also maps to colors, maps to planets, maps to shapes, geometric forms. Also worth noting, what happened to my tree of life picture? There you are. Also worth noting, okay, and I just did a post on this at my blog. The tree of life is man. So I don't know if that's clear to everybody or not, but like, you read the Garden of Eden and the tree of life, and Kabbalah generally is based off this idea that this is the same system that's being described. So there's subtle and nuanced space differences between the two, but these are effectively the same system. This is the physical form. Okay. So interestingly, the Vedic and basically the ancient Judaic tribes have similar understandings, I would say, to the basic structure of the human form. Different numbers involved and whatever, but you can see basically the chakras are here. So this gets into a lot of what I talk about from a Eurasian philosophy standpoint and theology reconsidered, of this sort of idea of how there's a common elemental root to some of these ancient mystic and esoteric again being hidden understandings, right? So so two other points here, images I want to get across before I probably close. I've talked a lot about this cosmic quantum energy field. In the talk, you start to see it now in this sort of 0 point energy, and this titled 0 point field of energy, and also this Higgs field, which is where antimatter is produced from matter or some shit. I mean, don't even ask. And this is a good mapping towards, and this is where the sacred geometry comes into play. You have sort of the physical form, you have the reactor-based physical form, and the chakras, which all have a geometric shape to them and a color, because they're light, like rainbows. And so, and once those, reactor elements you actually change the underlying geometry of the energetic geometry, let's say. And you have this sort of torus field that develops around the human form, which is, the sort of the light body, or at least the electromagnetic form of the human body, which sort of surrounds it and is a function of how you are operating within this sort of chakra-based, tree of life-based system in terms of how you're behaving, and what energy you're emitting and what you're tapped into, right? And the field changes. This is why people have auras. People can see people's auras. Yeah, they can. They exist. They at some level are more real than your flesh and bones. So that's here. And the other thing that I'll just introduce here, because it should become readily apparent. But you can see the DNA strands, okay, spinning around with sort of a mapping of the left and the right side in terms of how the DNA is structured. I'm not going to go into that too much, but I go into that in painstaking detail in Homo Mysticus. But you see sort of the same caduceus-based conceptual framework that's in place with respect to the two snakes and the energy. And that's how the DNA becomes activated, right? The energy moves through it. Without the energy, the DNA is dead. It literally is dead. So as above, so below, right? You have at the sort of fundamental core level, you have this sort of the DNA-based structure that gives you life, that builds and creates and maintains the physical form in ways that we don't even really fully understand yet. And then at the sort of the broader macro-based level, you have the same type of energy movement, let's say. So that's some visual imagery for today. I'm going to see how that video, how that actually comes out. I'm using Zoom. So let's see. The tech today is pretty amazing. If I can get this to work, I'll be very proud of myself. Anyway, namaste. Thanks for joining me. If you're still here and if you've gotten to the end, congratulations. Again, this is like pretty advanced level stuff. I can try and sort of synthesize this stuff, but I can't get this into a 30-second video. I just can't. So I'm taking some clips and I'm putting them on TikTok, Snowcone 1971, if you guys want to check that out. And I have some other sort of crystallized messages that seem to be the medium that TikTok likes. These sort of little small kind of core tidbits of, sayings and music, and, people like to be entertained. I get it. And then my YouTube channel, which you should be aware of, that, presumably you're watching this on, or some element of, and then my blog, where a lot of the intellectual stuff and the academic stuff comes out, which provides sort of the intellectual foundation for a lot of the material that I'm going to share here. The research has been done. Now I'm just sort of explaining it to everybody, what I found. With that, have a wonderful day. All right. Peace.